My name is Serena, I am 32 years old, and for most of my life, I have been treated like the extra chair at my own family table, useful when needed, ignored when convenient. I learned early that some families don't divide love equally. They allocate it the way accountants allocate budgets, strategically, selectively, and with an almost clinical coldness. Before I share how I stopped being their target and became their consequence, please like and subscribe if this hits close to home. In our family, Megan received the warmest portion. Megan was my half-sister, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and instantly collect admiration the way silk collects sunlight. She had the right smile, the right laugh, the right timing. Even when she said something cruel, she could make it sound like a harmless joke. People forgave her before they even understood what they were forgiving. And then there was me. Serena, the nurse. The one who always handled things. The one who worked overtime without complaint. The one who showed up when someone was sick, when a bill needed paying, when grandma's medication had to be picked up before the pharmacy closed. I wasn't celebrated for it. I was expected to be that way, because in their minds, I wasn't a daughter of the family. I was a charity case who happened to share some DNA. That phrase didn't come from my imagination. It came from their mouths, dressed up in softer language. Oh, Serena's so lucky we've always included her. She wouldn't have survived without us. She's sweet. You know, quiet. Like she doesn't need much. As if my silence was a sign of emptiness. The truth was simpler and sadder. I learned to become quiet because speaking in that house never changed anything. It only made me look dramatic. It only made my mother sigh with theatrical fatigue, as if my needs were an inconvenience she didn't have time to entertain. My mother's name is Diane. To outsiders, she is gentle, soft-spoken. The kind of woman people call kind because her cruelty is never overt. It's implied, like a shadow that falls across your feet before you see the person casting it. She mastered the art of dismissal. When I was young, she would place her hand on my shoulder and say, "You know how Megan is. Don't take it personally." When I got accepted into nursing school on scholarship because no one was going to pay my tuition, she nodded once, barely looking up from her phone. "That's good," she said. "Nursing is stable." Stable. That was the highest compliment I ever received from her. I wasn't brilliant. I wasn't impressive. I was stable. As if my greatest value was that I wouldn't collapse in public and embarrass them. Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, was worse in a more flamboyant way. Linda was the family's loudspeaker, opinionated, charismatic, and incapable of speaking without making herself the center of gravity. She never whispered cruelty. She announced it. If Megan was velvet, Linda was a hammer wrapped in glitter. "Oh look," Aunt Linda would say at gatherings, her voice bright enough to slice through conversation. "Serena's here. Our little angel. Always saving somebody." And people would laugh because the words sounded sweet. But the tone was unmistakable. The smile was too wide. The meaning was not admiration. It was a reminder, Serena exists to serve. The cousins followed their lead the way lesser planets orbit a larger one. They learned who to praise, who to mimic, who to step over. And Grandma Eleanor was the only constant softness in that entire landscape. She didn't speak much either, but when she looked at me, I felt seen. Not as a burden. Not as a background character. As a person. When I became a nurse and started working long shifts, Grandma was the one who insisted I rest. "You carry people all day," she would say, her voice like warm cloth. "Let someone carry you sometimes." But there was never anyone else to do it. Not in that family. When Grandma's illness began, subtle at first, then insistent, everyone made a show of concern. The messages came in like scripted lines. "Oh no, how is she feeling? Tell her I'm praying. Let me know if you need anything." Then the performance ended. Their lives continued, untouched. Mine did not. Because I was the one who left work at midnight to bring Grandma soup when she couldn't swallow properly. I was the one who drove across town after my shift to sit in her living room, measuring out pills with hands that still smelled faintly of antiseptic. I was the one who learned which medications could be taken together and which ones could quietly destroy her kidneys if the timing was wrong. And I did all of it with the calm precision that nursing teaches you, the kind of precision you develop when mistakes have consequences. But while I carried Grandma through her weakest days, the rest of my family treated my life like a side story. Something to be laughed at in passing. The inequality wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was small, almost invisible. Megan would post photos of herself visiting Grandma, smiling with a bouquet of flowers she bought on the way over. She stayed 30 minutes. Long enough to capture proof. Then she'd leave, because she had plans. Meanwhile, I slept on Grandma's couch some nights, my shoes still on, because I was afraid she might fall while going to the bathroom. And when I tried to mention it, gently, without accusation, my mother would become distant. "You're making it sound like we don't care," she'd say, voice wounded. "That's not fair, Serena." Fair. It was funny how fairness only mattered when I was the one suffering. Then my marriage ended. Not with screaming, not with dramatic betrayal. With exhaustion. With two people realizing that love cannot survive perpetual depletion. My husband, Mark, was not a villain. He was simply tired of being second to my family's constant crises. I remember the last night we spoke as spouses. The kitchen light was too bright. The air smelled like dishwasher soap. He looked at me with something mournful in his eyes. "I don't think there's room for me in your life," he said quietly. I wanted to argue. I wanted to deny it. But I couldn't. Because there wasn't. And when the divorce became real, when it turned into paperwork and signatures and the hollow weight of returning the spare key, my family didn't offer comfort. They offered commentary. Megan smiled like she'd been waiting for that chapter. Aunt Linda made a joke at Thanksgiving about how nursing girls always think they can fix everyone. My mother shook her head with that tired, disappointed expression she reserved for me. "You chose wrong," she said, as if my divorce was a stain on her reputation. I absorbed all of it the way I had absorbed everything else, quietly, because confrontation never brought relief. It only gave them a reason to paint me as unstable. And then came the night everything split open. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my longest days, 2 back-to-back shifts, one at the clinic, then an overnight at the hospital because someone called in sick. I had barely slept. My body felt like a machine running on fumes. The sky was the color of wet ash when I walked out into the parking lot. Cold rain had started falling, not aggressively, but persistently, like the world was quietly leaking. I sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel, staring forward without moving. That moment between duty and home. That thin space where your mind tries to breathe before the next demand arrives. My phone buzzed. A notification. A group chat. At first, I assumed it was an error in the harmless way, an accidental invitation to plan some family dinner I wouldn't attend. But the name stopped me. Real family only. The word sat there on my screen like an accusation. My thumb hovered, uncertain. A strange heaviness formed in my chest, as if my body understood what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Then another buzz. And another. Messages piling up. I clicked. The screen filled with laughter. Not the kind you hear in a room. Not the kind that disappears into air. The kind that remains, preserved, documented, permanent. The first thing I saw was my name. Serena's probably crying again. Then a reply from Megan. She always cries. That's her talent. A cascade of emojis followed. The laughing faces. The clapping hands. The same symbols people use to celebrate something cute. Except this wasn't cute. This was me. My heart began to beat in a slow, brutal rhythm. I scrolled, and the messages didn't stop. They weren't recent. They weren't from today. They were years. Years of my life, reduced to entertainment. There were texts about my divorce. Mark finally escaped. He deserves a medal. There were messages about my job. She acts like she's a hero because she wipes old people. There were jokes about my finances. How long until she asked Grandma for money again? And then I saw something that made my fingers go cold. A betting pool. They had turned my failures into a game. Literal predictions about when I'd mess up next. Whether I'd lose another relationship. Whether I'd burn out and quit nursing. It was so absurd, so grotesque, that for a moment my mind didn't know how to process it. I felt like I was watching strangers invent a cruel character named Serena, except the details were too accurate. Too personal. Too intimate. Because they weren't inventing anything. They were watching me all these years. They were tracking me. They were laughing in private while smiling at me in public. And the cruelest part. They did it while I was taking care of Grandma. While I was sleeping in waiting rooms. While I was counting pills. While I was standing in grocery store aisles choosing the cheapest brand of soup so I could afford her prescriptions. I swallowed hard, and my throat felt raw. The rain tapped against the windshield like impatient fingers. I looked down at my hands, trembling slightly, not from anger. From shock. Because I had always known I wasn't loved the way Megan was loved. But I hadn't realized I was being enjoyed. Enjoyed the way people enjoy a tragic movie. Enjoyed for the spectacle of struggle. I scrolled higher, back through the years, and it kept going. 7 years. 7 years of messages. 7 years of laughter behind my back. My name appeared again and again like a target. And then I saw it, the line that clarified their entire philosophy. Megan wrote. She's not real family. She's just the charity case. We can laugh because she always fails anyway. I stared at that message for a long time. The words were casual. Almost bored. As if my pain was a predictable season. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it immediately. I let it fall. I let myself feel what my body had been holding back for years. Then, very slowly, something changed. A quiet shift. Not rage. Not hysteria. Something colder, sharper, more deliberate. Because in that moment, I understood something that would redefine my life. They didn't fear me. They didn't respect me. They didn't think I was capable of doing anything other than taking what they gave me. Which meant they had been reckless. Careless. And careless people leave evidence. My phone buzzed again, another message arriving. Aunt Linda. Who added her? Megan replied quickly. Not me, Remove her now. My mother. Delete this chat, delete. As if deleting a chat could delete years. As if removing me could undo what I'd already seen. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have confronted them right there. Sent one calm message. Watched them scramble. But something inside me, something that had learned patience from long nights in hospitals, told me not to waste this moment on impulse. So I did the one thing they never expected me to do. I became organized. I started taking screenshots. Not random ones. Systematic ones. I captured names, dates, context. Every message that mocked my divorce. Every message that reduced my nursing to a joke. Every line that proved they saw me as lesser. I created folders in my phone. I labeled them. I saved them. A quiet archive, receipts. And as I worked, my breathing steadied. The tears stopped. The trembling in my hands faded. Because the moment I began collecting proof, I stopped being their victim. I became their witness. And witnesses don't shout. They document. They preserve. They wait. By the time I finished, the group chat had gone silent. Probably because they removed me. Probably because they panicked. But it didn't matter. They could scrub their phones. They could pretend innocence. I had already saved the truth. 847 messages. 7 years of cruelty. All neatly stored, like evidence in a file cabinet. I leaned back in my seat, rainlight reflecting on the dashboard, and I whispered aloud, only to myself. Thanks for the receipts. Then my phone buzzed again. Not the group chat. A text from Grandma Eleanor. Are you coming by tonight, sweetheart? I stared at her message, and something soft returned to my chest. Because Grandma didn't know yet. She didn't know her own daughter, her own niece, her own grandchildren had been laughing at me while I kept her alive. And as I sat there in the quiet of my car, damp from the rain, exhausted from the world, I realized the betrayal wasn't over. Not yet, because Grandma's 70th birthday was coming. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into that family gathering as the charity case. I was walking in with an archive. With proof. With patience. With the kind of calm that comes from knowing the ending before anyone else does. Grandma's house always smelled like peppermint tea and old paper, like the past was still living there, breathing softly. That night, I parked under her porch light and sat in my car for a full minute before stepping out. The rain had followed me home, persistent and cold, threading itself through my hair and collar. I could still feel the group chat behind my eyes, those messages, preserved like insects in amber. When I walked in, Grandma Eleanor looked up from her recliner. A knitted blanket was draped across her lap. The television was on, but muted. Her attention wasn't on the screen. It was on me. "You look like you've been holding your breath," she said. Some people ask that as a figure of speech. Grandma didn't. She asked it like she could hear the silent strain inside your rib cage. I forced a small smile and hung my coat. "I'm fine," I said automatically. Grandma's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in something more accurate, recognition. "You always say that right before you do something brave," she murmured. I paused. My fingers curled around the strap of my bag. "Brave?" I repeated. Grandma reached for the remote and turned the television off completely. The sudden quiet felt ceremonial, like she was creating a space where honesty could exist without interruption. "Come sit," she said. So I did. I sat on the edge of the sofa, keeping my posture composed, careful not to look like a woman whose world had just been rewritten. But my hands gave me away. I kept clasping them together, unclasping them, as if I needed something to anchor me. Grandma watched my hands for a long moment, then spoke softly. "They've been unkind again," she said. It wasn't a question. Something in my throat tightened. I didn't want to cry in front of her, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want to burden her with my exhaustion. But Grandma Eleanor had never been fragile. She had simply been ill. Illness is not the same thing as weakness. I took a breath. "They didn't just say something this time," I said carefully. "They documented it." Grandma blinked once, slow, patient. "Show me," she said. I hesitated. "Grandma?" "Serena," she interrupted gently, using the tone she once used when I tried to hide fevers as a child. "I am 70 years old. I have lived long enough to survive the truth." That was the moment my restraint softened. I took out my phone and opened the folder I'd created. My thumb hovered, then tapped. 847 messages. A museum of cruelty. I handed her the screen. She didn't flinch the way I expected. She didn't gasp dramatically. She didn't press a hand to her chest. She read. Quietly, completely. And as she scrolled, I watched her face change in subtle increments, like stone being carved into something sharper. I could see the precise moment she read the words charity case. Her jaw tightened, not with outrage, but with an old, disciplined fury that didn't waste energy. Her fingers, thin and elegant, held the phone steady. Her eyes did not water. Finally, she handed it back to me. She leaned into her chair and folded her hands over the blanket. "I suspected," she said. I stared at her. "You suspected?" Grandma exhaled through her nose as if she'd been holding patience for years. "Do you think I didn't notice who stopped visiting the moment I got sick?" she asked. "Do you think I didn't notice how you arrived with groceries while they arrived with flowers and cameras?" I swallowed. The room felt warmer, yet the air around me felt sharpened by clarity. "They smile at you," I said. "They act like they adore you." Grandma's mouth curved, not in amusement, but in something almost sorrowful. "They adore what they think I can still give them," she said. "That is not love. That is anticipation." Her words landed with quiet weight. I looked down at my phone again, at those messages, and my stomach tightened. "I don't want to ruin your birthday," I said quietly. Grandma's gaze drifted to the window where rain traced delicate patterns down the glass. My birthday will not be ruined, she said. It will be clarified. I blinked. Clarified? She looked at me then, fully. You think this started tonight, she said. But Serena, they have been rehearsing this narrative for years. They have been training the room to accept their version of you. Her voice stayed calm, but I felt the steel underneath it. And I'm tired, she added, of watching you be punished for being decent. I sat very still. Grandma continued, do you know why people like your mother and Linda behave the way they do? I didn't answer. She answered for me. Because they've never had consequences, she said. Not real ones. Not public ones. My fingers tightened around my phone. I could hear my own heartbeat again, but it sounded steadier now, less like panic, more like alignment. What do you want me to do? I asked. Grandma leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped into something almost private. I want you to attend my birthday, she said. And I want you to stay calm. Let them perform. I stared at her. Perform? What? Grandma's eyes flickered with a quiet intelligence. Their innocence, she said. Their affection. Their superiority. Then she paused, and her next words were precise, carefully measured, like a prescription. And I want you to bring your receipts. The week leading up to Grandma's birthday felt like watching a storm gather while everyone insisted the skies were clear. Megan began sending family-wide texts filled with theatrical warmth. Can't wait to celebrate Grandma. Big milestone. Let's make this special. My mother chimed in with her usual elegance, polite, curated. Please arrive early. We want everything perfect for Mom. Aunt Linda took control of the details. I'm doing the cake. Nobody touched the cake plan because I already have a vision. And then, 2 days before the party, Megan called me. It was unusual. Megan didn't call me unless she needed something. I answered. Serena, she said brightly, as if we had a relationship that wasn't built on condescension. Hi. Hi, I replied. There was a slight pause, like she was waiting for me to sound grateful. I just wanted to make sure you're coming, she continued. Grandma would be so sad if you weren't there. It wasn't concern. It was control. I could hear the smile in her voice, smooth, practiced, overtly sweet. I'll be there, I said. Good, Megan said quickly. Then her tone shifted, subtly sharpened. And Serena, let's keep things peaceful, okay? Mom's been stressed. Ah, there it was. The preemptive warning. The subtle framing. If anything happened at that party, I would be the one blamed for disrupting the family. I let my silence stretch for a beat. Then I replied with calm precision. Of course, I said. I'm always peaceful. Megan laughed, as if I'd made a joke. Perfect, she said. See you then. When she hung up, I didn't feel angry. I felt prepared. Because Megan thought she was steering the night. She didn't realize the stage had already been built underneath her feet. On the day of Grandma's birthday, the sun made a brief appearance, but the air remained cold. The kind of cold that slips under your clothing and settles in your bones. By the time I arrived, the backyard had been transformed into a postcard version of family devotion. Strings of warm lights. A long table dressed in pale cloth. Plates arranged with deliberate symmetry. Megan's voice floated through the air, bright and commanding, narrating the scene like a hostess in a lifestyle video. Over here. No, not there. Grandma needs to be centered. As I stepped through the gate, the conversations briefly paused, just long enough for eyes to register me. I saw it all at once. My mother's polite smile tightening at the corners. Aunt Linda's gaze scanning me like she was looking for a flaw. The cousins exchanging small glances, quick and dismissive. Megan turning, her expression blooming into performative delight. Serena, Megan cried, arms opening in an exaggerated welcome. You made it. I allowed her to hug me, because refusing would have fed her narrative. She smelled like expensive perfume and effort. Her hug lasted half a second too long, as if she wanted to prove ownership of the moment. You look well, she said, stepping back and tilting her head. It was not a compliment. It was surprise that I looked composed. Thank you, I said calmly. Happy birthday day to Grandma. Megan's smile flickered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered instantly. She's inside, Megan said. Wait till you see the setup. I did so much. I did so much. Even on Grandma's birthday, Megan managed to make herself the subject. I walked inside, and there was Grandma Eleanor, seated in her favorite chair, wearing a soft blue dress and pearl earrings that made her look like a woman attending her own coronation. When she saw me, her eyes softened. But she didn't reach for me the way a weak person would. She simply held my gaze. A silent exchange. A quiet understanding. You're here. You're steady. Stay steady. I leaned down and kissed her cheek. Happy birthday, Grandma. Thank you, sweetheart, she said. Then she whispered, barely moving her lips. Do you have it? I nodded once. Grandma's fingers tapped lightly against the armrest, one controlled movement, like a conductor preparing an orchestra. Good, she murmured. Then we will proceed. The party unfolded like a scripted play. Megan floated from guest to guest, laughing at the right moments, touching arms lightly, collecting attention like a currency she never ran out of. My mother hovered near Grandma, performing dutiful daughterhood. Aunt Linda controlled the conversation volume, ensuring no silence could ever become truth. And I moved through it all like a quiet shadow, polite, observant, unreactive. That was when Megan decided to test me. It began with photos. Okay, everyone. She called, holding up her phone. Big group picture. Grandma in the center. People shuffled into place. There was laughter, clinking glasses, instructions shouted across the yard. I stepped toward Grandma naturally, because I belonged there. But Megan's hand extended, subtle, almost casual, stopping me with the gentlest pressure on my arm. Actually, Serena, she said, voice sweet enough to fool strangers, can you stand over there, like, on the side? We need to keep it balanced, balanced. A word used when someone wants to rearrange you like furniture. I looked at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. She was smiling. Behind her, I saw my mother watching, expression carefully neutral. Aunt Linda's mouth twitched with satisfaction. The cousins pretended not to notice, while noticing everything. And I realized Megan wasn't just moving me for a photo. She was reminding me of my place, publicly. She wanted the room to see it. She wanted me to feel it. I could have argued. I could have walked away. I could have made it dramatic. But drama would have served them. So I simply nodded. Sure, I said softly, and stepped to the side. Megan's smile brightened. Victory, she thought. She didn't know she had just placed herself in the perfect spotlight for what was coming. As the camera clicked, Megan laughed, then called out loudly. Someone tagged Serena too. She's like our cousin, technically. Technically. The word landed in the air like a slap dressed as humor. A few people chuckled awkwardly. My mother didn't correct her. Aunt Linda smiled as if she'd witnessed something clever. Grandma Eleanor said nothing. Not yet. But I saw Grandma's fingers tighten around her glass. Just slightly. That was when I knew. The performance was almost over. They brought out the cake. A grand, elegant thing with delicate piping and gold accents. Aunt Linda practically strutted beside it like she had built it with her bare hands. Megan clapped her hands together. Okay, okay. Everyone quiet. She called. It's speech time. The guests gathered closer. Drinks in hand. Smiles on faces. Phones lifted. Megan stepped forward first, of course. She cleared her throat dramatically. Grandma Eleanor, she began, voice trembling with manufactured emotion, you've always been the heart of this family. She spoke for 2 minutes about love, legacy, devotion, words that sounded beautiful when detached from reality. Then she turned slightly toward me, and I saw her eyes flicker with something sharp. And we've all done our part to support you, Megan said. emphasizing all. That sentence was a lie wrapped in glitter. She finished with a flourish. Happy birthday, Grandma. Applause erupted. Megan turned as if she expected Grandma to praise her, to confirm her as the star. Instead, Grandma Eleanor lifted her hand. The applause slowed, then stopped. Silence spread across the yard like a shadow. Grandma Eleanor stood, slowly, deliberately. The air changed. Even the wind seemed to hold still. My dears, Grandma said, her voice gentle but carrying. Thank you for the cake. Thank you for the lights. Thank you for coming. Everyone smiled, relieved, expecting softness. Then Grandma paused. And thank you for reminding me, she continued, that love is not what people say in public. A few faces tightened. Grandma looked at Megan. It is what people do in private. Megan's smile faltered, just slightly. My mother's eyes darted toward Grandma, warning. Aunt Linda's posture stiffened. Grandma's gaze moved across the group like a slow scan. For 10 years, Grandma said, I have watched Serena carry what others refuse to touch. My throat tightened. Megan's mouth opened, then closed. Grandma continued calmly. She was the one who picked up my medication. She was the one who learned my treatments. She was the one who sat with me when the nights were long. Then Grandma's voice sharpened, still calm, but now surgically precise. And while she did that, Grandma said, some of you made sport of her. The yard went still. A cough from somewhere. A chair creaked. Megan laughed lightly, too quickly. Oh, Grandma, she said, trying to rescue the moment. We're all just joking around sometimes. Grandma raised her hand again. No, she said. Not this time. Megan froze. Grandma looked at me then. Serena, she said. Would you like to show them? My pulse beat once, heavy, loud in my ears. I stepped forward. Not trembling. Not angry. Just, deliberate. I held up my phone. Megan's face drained slightly of color. My mother whispered, Serena, don't. Aunt Linda snapped, this is not the time. Grandma turned her head toward Linda. It is exactly the time, she said. And then Grandma's voice became the final authority in the room. Sit down, she commanded softly. Linda blinked like she'd been slapped. People obeyed. Even Linda. Even my mother. Even Megan, who did not sit, but stood very still, as if sitting would confirm guilt. I opened the folder. 847 messages. I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. I picked the first one that mattered, the one that summarized their entire cruelty. And I read it out loud. She's not real family, I said, voice even. She's just the charity case. We can laugh because she always fails anyway. The words hung in the air. No music. No laughter. No escape. Megan whispered, that's out of context. I clicked another screenshot. Mark finally escaped, I read. He deserves a medal. Someone inhaled sharply. My mother's face turned pale. A cousin looked down at the grass, suddenly fascinated by the ground. Aunt Linda's lips parted, but no sound came out. I clicked again. She acts like she's a hero because she wipes old people, I continued, still calm. That one made me laugh. Considering half of you couldn't even sit with Grandma for an hour without checking your phones. Megan's eyes widened. Stop, Megan hissed through her teeth. You're embarrassing yourself. I looked at her then. And I smiled, just slightly. No, I said gently. I'm embarrassing you. The difference mattered. Grandma Eleanor stepped forward beside me. Her presence was quiet, but it carried the weight of verdict. My daughter, Grandma said, looking at my mother, you allowed this. My mother's lips trembled. Mom, I didn't. Grandma cut her off with a small shake of her head. You didn't stop it, Grandma said. Which means you chose it. My mother's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of fear. Because now she understood. This wasn't an emotional confrontation. This was a collapse. Megan tried again. Grandma, Serena is twisting things. She's always been sensitive. Grandma turned to Megan. Megan, she said, voice calm, do you know what sensitivity is? Megan blinked rapidly. It is when someone feels deeply, Grandma continued. But what you displayed was not sensitivity. It was entertainment. Megan's mouth tightened. Grandma spoke again, and her words landed like stone. You laughed at her divorce, Grandma said. You laughed at her job. You laughed at the idea of her failing. Grandma paused. Yet she is the only one here who has consistently succeeded at being decent. Silence. A strange, holy silence, the kind that arrives when a room realizes it has been caught. Then Grandma said, softly, I want everyone to understand something. She took a step forward. This family has lived on a story, Grandma said. A story where Megan is the jewel, and Serena is the spare. Megan flinched. Grandma continued. I am 70 years old, she said. And I have no appetite left for delusion. Then she looked at the gathered guests, neighbors, friends, people who came expecting cake and smiles. I am sorry you had to witness this, Grandma said politely. But I refuse to die with lies in my house. My stomach tightened. Then Grandma turned to Megan again. Now, Grandma said, you will apologize. Megan's eyes flashed. I'm not. Grandma's voice remained calm. You will, she said. Or you will leave. Megan stared around the room, searching for support. My mother, Aunt Linda, the cousins. No one moved. Because no one wanted to stand beside her now. Megan swallowed. Her voice came out strained. I'm sorry, she said. But it wasn't remorse. It was compliance. Grandma nodded as if she expected nothing else. Then she turned to me. And Serena, Grandma said softly, you have done enough. My chest tightened. I wanted to speak, but words felt too small. Grandma continued, you will not carry the weight of people who mock you. Not anymore. And in that moment, I understood something. This wasn't only about revenge. It was about permission. Permission to stop begging for a seat at a table where I was only ever a prop. I looked at Megan, at my mother, at Aunt Linda. They were all frozen, humiliated in their expensive clothes, caught without an excuse that could save them. And I felt something I had never felt in that family before, freedom. The strangest thing about winning is how quiet it becomes afterward. There was no triumphant music. No grand announcement. No cinematic applause that tells you the villain has finally been defeated. There was only the sound of wind moving through the backyard lights, and the faint clatter of a serving spoon against a plate, someone's hand trembling so badly they couldn't pretend to be normal. Megan stood frozen, her lips slightly parted, her eyes darting the way trapped people search for exits. My mother looked like she had been carved out from the inside, hollowed by the sudden collapse of the story she had spent years maintaining. Aunt Linda tried to regain control through volume. It was always her method. If she could speak loudly enough, she could create a new reality. This is inappropriate, she snapped, forcing a brittle laugh. It's a birthday party. Serena, you're making a spectacle. Her words were meant to shame me. To put me back into the familiar posture, apologetic, embarrassed, quietly retreating. But the atmosphere had changed. Spectacles require an audience willing to be entertained. This room was no longer entertained. It was instructed. Grandma Eleanor turned her head slowly toward Linda, and I watched Aunt Linda's confidence falter in real time. Inappropriate? Grandma repeated, as if tasting the word. Aunt Linda drew herself taller, desperate to appear unbothered. Yes, she said. You don't air family business in front of guests. People will talk. Grandma smiled faintly. They should, she said. The sentence was quiet, yet it slammed into the yard like a bell. Aunt Linda stared, stunned by the audacity of a woman she'd always assumed would remain soft. Grandma continued, her voice still gentle, still composed, but carrying unmistakable authority. If people talk, Grandma said, perhaps they will finally talk about the truth. Megan opened her mouth, ready to redirect, to charm the air into forgetting. But Grandma turned her gaze to her, and Megan's voice died before it became sound. Megan's eyes flashed with panic now. She looked at my mother like a drowning person looking for a raft. "Mom," Megan said, barely above a whisper. "Say something." My mother's mouth moved, but nothing came out. Because for once, she understood that speaking would not rescue her. It would only expose her further. The guests began shifting. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked fascinated. A few looked quietly disgusted. And then, one of Grandma's neighbors, a woman with silver hair and polite eyes, stepped forward slowly. She held her purse in both hands as if bracing herself. "Eleanor," she said softly, "I had no idea." Grandma nodded once. "That is why I'm saying it out loud," Grandma replied. "No bitterness. No theatrics. Just the truth placed on a table where everyone could see it." My heart was still beating fast, but my hands were steady now. The adrenaline had cooled into something calmer, something almost medicinal. I wasn't trying to punish them anymore. I was simply refusing to protect them. Megan took a step toward me, lowering her voice. "Serena," she hissed through her smile, "you're going to regret this." I tilted my head slightly. "Regret?" I repeated, as if the word amused me. Megan's eyes tightened. "You humiliated me. You humiliated all of us." I stared at her face, at the careful makeup, the perfect hair, the fragile pride underneath it all. "No," I said quietly. "You humiliated me for 7 years. Tonight, I just stopped cooperating." Megan's jaw clenched. "This isn't over," she whispered. Her threat would have terrified the old version of me. The version that still hoped love could be earned if she worked hard enough. But now I understood something essential. People who threaten you after being caught do it because they have nothing else left. So I didn't argue. I didn't escalate. I simply held her gaze and said, with calm finality, "It is." Megan's expression twisted for a moment, shock, fury, disbelief. Then she turned abruptly, scanning the guests again. She needed someone to validate her. Someone to excuse her. But no one stepped forward. Even my cousins, those loyal satellites, looked away. Because association is a choice. And in that moment, Megan was no longer a safe choice. Grandma Eleanor placed a hand lightly on my arm. "Come inside," she murmured. "Let them sit in what they created." So we did. We left the yard full of lights and cake and performance behind us, and walked into the quiet interior of Grandma's home. The living room was dim and warm. The familiar scent of peppermint tea wrapped around me like protection. Grandma sat in her chair again, and for the first time all evening, her shoulders relaxed. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I am sorry." I blinked. "Grandma, you have nothing to be sorry for." "Yes," she replied softly. "I do." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "I should have intervened sooner," she said. "I thought kindness would correct them. I thought time would soften their selfishness." She looked up again, and her voice hardened slightly. "But time doesn't soften people like that," she continued. "It only makes them bolder." I swallowed, feeling something heavy shift in my chest. "I didn't want you to feel guilty," I said quietly. Grandma's mouth curved with a sadness that held wisdom. "I don't feel guilty," she said. "I feel awake." She reached to the side table and opened a drawer. Then she pulled out a sealed envelope. My breath caught. The envelope was thick, formal. My name was written across it in Grandma's handwriting, steady and elegant. "Grandma," I whispered. She held it out. "This is for you," she said. "Not as a reward. As a correction." I didn't open it immediately. My fingers trembled, not from fear this time, but from the strange disbelief that comes when life finally gives you something you stopped expecting. I looked at her. "What is it?" Grandma's eyes didn't waver. "It is your protection," she said. "And their consequence." I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were documents, copies. I saw notarized pages, signatures. A carefully prepared folder that didn't look like a last-minute decision, it looked like something planned with precision. My eyes moved across the heading, and I felt my throat tighten. Power of attorney, Executor designation. Primary beneficiary amendments. Grandma had rearranged her world in ink. I looked up, stunned. You, I whispered. You did this. Grandma nodded. I did it months ago, she said. After I saw Megan's eyes when she looked at my jewelry. I swallowed hard. And after your mother tried to suggest I make certain decisions, Grandma continued, her voice cool. Decisions that would benefit them. My stomach twisted. My mother. My own mother. Grandma continued calmly. She thought she was subtle, Grandma said. She thought I was too tired to notice. Grandma's gaze sharpened. But Serena, I may have been sick. I was not blind. I stared down at the documents again. It was all so clear now. The sudden sweetness, the sudden visits, the sudden calls. They weren't there for her. They were there for what they believed she would leave behind. A legacy. An inheritance. A prize. And Grandma Eleanor had moved the prize out of their reach like a chess player removing a queen from attack. A quiet knock sounded on the door. It startled me. The party was still outside, but the sound was too close, too urgent. Grandma didn't flinch. Let them knock, she said. The knock came again, harder. Then a voice, sharp, strained. Mom. My mother called through the door. Open up. Grandma looked at me. Not with fear. With expectation. Would you like to? She asked softly. I stood. Not because I wanted a confrontation. Because I wanted closure. I opened the door. My mother stood on the porch, her face twisted between outrage and desperation. Megan was behind her, pale and furious. Aunt Linda hovered slightly to the side, eyes darting as if calculating how to spend this. My mother stepped forward immediately. What was that? She demanded. What did you do? I blinked slowly. I didn't do anything, I said calmly. I read what you wrote. Megan's voice cut in, sharp and brittle. You think you're so righteous, she said. You always wanted to be the victim. I looked at her. Megan, I said softly, you turned my pain into a hobby. Her face flushed. My mother pushed forward again, voice rising. This is my mother's birthday, she snapped. You ruined it. You brought outsiders into private matters. I kept my voice even. You made it private so you could be cruel without consequence, I replied. My mother's mouth tightened. You've always been ungrateful. The word felt familiar. A weapon she'd used for years. I nodded faintly. And you've always been comfortable saying that, I said. Because you assumed I'd keep swallowing it. Aunt Linda stepped in, trying to regain control. Now listen, she began, voice loud and commanding. We can all calm down and... Grandma Eleanor appeared behind me then, standing in the doorway like a quiet judge. Her presence instantly silenced the porch. My mother's expression shifted, forced into softness. Mom, she said quickly, lowering her voice. You know we love you. This was humiliating. Grandma tilted her head slightly. Humiliating. She repeated. My mother swallowed. Yes, she said. People were looking at us like we were monsters. Grandma's eyes stayed steady. Perhaps, she said calmly, that is because you behave monstrously. Megan's face tightened. Grandma, don't say that, Megan pleaded, voice trembling. You know Serena twists things. She's always emotional. Grandma raised her hand gently. Megan, she said, the only thing Serena twisted was her own silence into survival. She paused, then added. I will not allow you to speak about her like that again. Megan's eyes widened. But Grandma's voice remained calm, but it now carried finality. I have already made my decisions, Grandma said. My mother's breath caught. What decisions? She asked, suddenly cautious. Grandma looked at her with a level stare. Decisions about what comes after I'm gone, she said. A flash of fear crossed my mother's face, quick and involuntary. It was almost comical, how quickly love became calculation. My mother's voice softened unnaturally. Mom. We don't need to talk about that right now, she said. You're upset. Grandma smiled faintly. I am not upset, she said. I am resolved. Then Grandma turned her gaze to me. Serena, she said gently, would you tell them? I swallowed. My hands were still holding the folder. I lifted it slightly. You don't have access anymore, I said calmly. Not to her decisions. Not to her care. Not to her legacy. My mother blinked rapidly. What are you talking about? She demanded, though her voice shook. I'm her executor, I said evenly. I'm her power of attorney. And any attempts to pressure her have already been documented. Aunt Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Megan's face drained of color. My mother's voice cracked. You did this. She whispered to Grandma, as if betrayed. Grandma's gaze didn't soften. Yes, she said. I did. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the pure kind. They were tears soaked in panic and loss. But why? She begged. I'm your daughter. Grandma nodded once. And Serena is the one who treated me like a mother, she replied. Silence. Thick and suffocating. My mother looked at me then, not with maternal affection, but with the sharp hostility of someone who has lost control of a resource. You planned this, she whispered. I met her gaze calmly. No, I said. You did. Megan suddenly snapped, voice rising. This is insane, she hissed. We're family. Grandma's eyes narrowed slightly. Family, she repeated, is not a title you wear. It is a standard you uphold. Megan's mouth trembled. So what now? You're going to cut us off. Grandma's voice remained quiet. I am going to protect what I built, she said. From people who treat love like a transaction. Aunt Linda stepped back slightly, as if she could escape being involved. My mother's posture crumpled. For the first time, she looked small. Mom, she whispered, please. Grandma didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I gave you chances, she said. I gave you years. You chose performance over integrity. Then she opened the door wider and gestured, calm as a queen. You may leave, she said. My mother stared at her, stunned. Megan looked ready to explode, but she couldn't, not here, not in front of Grandma. Aunt Linda swallowed hard. And then, slowly, they stepped backward off the porch, their pride collapsing under the weight of consequence. As they retreated, my mother looked at me one final time. There was hatred there. And something else, fear. Because now she understood. She could no longer control the narrative. She could no longer use me as the family's quiet servant. I closed the door gently. Not in anger. In conclusion. After that night, my phone stayed eerily quiet. No more false sweetness. No more checking in. Only silence, the kind of silence that appears when people realize their manipulation has stopped working. But consequences travel. The guests had talked, just as Aunt Linda feared. Not in the exaggerated way gossip usually moves, but in the subdued way truth spreads when it finally finds oxygen. Neighbors looked at Megan differently after that. Friends became cautious around my mother. Even my cousins, those loyal followers, began distancing themselves, because no one wants to stand beside cruelty when it has been named publicly. The family didn't lose everything because I screamed. They lost everything because they were seen. And I learned something I wish I had known earlier. Public dignity matters. It is the currency of people who survive by appearances. When that currency is taken from them, they become bankrupt overnight. Grandma Eleanor grew lighter after that. She slept better. She laughed more. Her house felt less haunted. And me? I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. Because I finally stopped asking to be chosen. I chose myself. I continued nursing, not as the family's invisible helper, but as a woman who knew her worth. I took a week off work later that month, not because I was exhausted, but because I could. I went somewhere quiet, where the ocean was wide and indifferent, where the air didn't carry anyone's judgment. I sat with my coffee in the early mornings, watching sunlight unfold across the water, and I realized something with a strange, melancholic peace. Some families don't deserve access to you. They deserve distance. Grandma Eleanor called me that morning. Where are you? She asked, amused. Somewhere peaceful, I replied. Good, she said. Stay there. Then she paused, and her voice turned soft. Serena, she said, promise me something. Yes, Grandma. Promise me you won't spend the rest of your life proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, she said. I looked out at the ocean. I promise, I whispered. And I meant it. Because winning wasn't just humiliating them. Winning was finally leaving the stage they built for me. Walking away. And never returning.